skolverksamhet i utanförskapsområden. Dock inte i Sverige, utan framför allt om det som händer i USA och England. Men vi har även goda exempel från Sverige. Det ska vi också få lyssna på lite senare. Det är en del i en större satsning som Svenskt Näringsliv gör. Där vi försöker identifiera vad som behöver göras för att höja kunskapen i den svenska skolan. Vi vill skapa en arena, Svenskt Näringslivs skolforum. Vi vill skapa en arena där vi har en förutsättningslös diskussion, där vi får lite mer av probleminsikt och där vi framför allt delar erfarenheter och inte minst med lite internationell utblick. Tidigare i år så har vi haft seminarium om STEM-strategi. En nationell strategi för de naturvetenskapliga ämnena. Vi har haft ett seminarium som har handlat om kursplaner, framförallt i matematik. Om vad vi behöver ha i en kursplan för att höja kunskapsnivån. Och framförallt i vilken ordning vi lär saker. Otroligt viktiga områden för det svenska näringslivet. För vi har brister på allt från ingenjörer och naturvetare till personer med mer praktisk yrkesinriktning. Idag har turen kommit till kanske det största problemet av alla i svensk skola. Nämligen verksamheterna i utanförskapsområden med många elever med icke-europeisk bakgrund. Vi har stora kunskapsutmaningar i de områdena. Och vi behöver göra allt som står i vår makt för att ta till oss inspiration, idéer, kreativitet för att kunna lösa dagens situation. Och för den sakens skull har vi då bjudit in skolledare, skoldebattör Katharine Birbalsingh från England. Hon har startat en skola som heter Michaela Community School. Där fokuserar man, hela approachen är vad man kallar no excuses. Det vill säga hårda krav, hårda kunskapskrav på eleverna, men också disciplin. Vi ska också få lyssna till vetenskaplig utvärdering av skolor som bedriver verksamhet med no excuses approachen. Och det har vi Gabriel Heller Salgren till vår hjälp. Och sen ska vi få lyssna då på ett riktigt gott exempel från Sverige. En skola från Eskilstuna. Det ska också bli väldigt, väldigt, väldigt spännande. So, a special welcome to you, Katharine Birbalsingh, and a warm welcome to all of you. And now, I leave the floor to Gustav Blix, who will lead us through this seminar today. Thank you.
Thank you, Karin. Och tack snälla Karin. Vi kommer under den här övningen att växla mellan svenska och engelska. Men jag börjar på svenska och vi kommer fortsätta till och från på engelska. Men jag heter Gustav Blix. Jag är ansvarig för grundskolefrågor här på Svenskt Näringsliv. Och det är vi också som har tagit initiativet till Näringslivets skolforum. Det har vi gjort precis som Karin har berättat för att vi vill erbjuda en mötesplats, en kunskapsgivande arena för möten mellan forskning, skolväsende, politik, näringsliv och andra samhällsaktörer. Då vi också idag har rätt många deltagare som följer det här via länk så skulle jag också inledningsvis vilja be alla att se till att stänga av era mobiltelefoner. Och sen återigen så kommer vi ju då varva mellan svenska och engelska. Vi har också delat ut Gabriels rapport för den som vill och vi har även och kommer göra tillgänglig både Gabriels prestationsbilder och övrigt material senare på vår hemsida för er som följer. Som Karin nämnde så är kunskapsresultaten en jättestor utmaning. Vi pratar mycket om de som inte når behörighet. De är väldigt många. Men vi glömmer ibland att hela var fjärde elev inte når upp till de krav som vi har ställt på vad som är godkända resultat när man lämnar grundskolan. De lyckas inte i alla ämnen. Var fjärde elev. Om man då tittar på den här elevgruppen så precis som Karin sa, många av dem kommer från en svagare socioekonomisk bakgrund. De har föräldrar med lägre utbildningsbakgrund. En stor del har utländsk bakgrund. Flera, kanske rent av många, går också i områden. Och många av de skolor som har störst utmaningar ligger i områden som också har tuffa förutsättningar i övrigt. Det är därför som vi vill uppmärksamma vad man har gjort i andra länder men också vad man gör i Sverige. Och därför ska vi idag ha ett seminarium med 3 deltagare. Som Karin nämnde ska vi börja med att lyssna på Katharine Birbalsingh från Michaela Community School. Hon kommer berätta lite kort om vad de jobbar med där. Därefter ska ju då Gabriel Sahlgren presentera sin rapport. Och vi kommer sen ha Damian Brunker från Internationella Engelska Skolan i Eskilstuna. En skola som ligger i ett av dessa mycket tuffa områden och ska dela med sig om hur verkligheten ser ut men också vad man faktiskt kan åstadkomma i Sverige. Men vi ska sen ha en paneldiskussion om vad är begränsningarna då och vad är möjligheterna i det här? Vad är det vi kan och vad är det vi inte kan göra? Vad borde vi göra mer? Inte minst för att lyfta resultaten för de elever som har allra svårast att nå godkänt i alla grundskolans ämnen. Men först då, varmt välkommen Gabriel Sahlgren. Gabriel kan komma upp. Gabriel har en doktorsexamen från London School of Economics och är också bosatt i Storbritannien. Men är också som forskare knuten till Institutet för näringslivsforskning IFN. Han har skrivit ett antal texter, rapporter och böcker. Man kan till exempel nämna boken Glädjeparadoxen som han skrev tillsammans med Nima Sanandaji 2019. Som handlar om historien om skolans uppgång, fall och möjliga upprättelse. Man har också gjort ett antal analyser och berättelser om vad som är utmaningarna i svensk skola. Gabriel, du ska berätta om din rapport. Den heter då No Excuses, en skolpolitisk lösning för Sveriges utanförskapsområden. Varsågod Gabriel.
Tack så mycket. Ja, kul att vara här. Det här baseras ju på den här rapporten som ni har fått tillgång till. Jag har inte så jättemycket tid. Jag tror att det här är den enda presentationen som är på svenska, så ni får njuta nu och lyssna på vårt vackra språk, i alla fall 15 minuter, och sen om ni har några frågor också. Så. Lite kort om bakgrunden till den här rapporten. Jag har under det senaste året skrivit mycket om att de svenska skolresultaten har ökat väldigt mycket de senaste 10 åren. Svenska resultat föll mellan 1995 och 2000 beroende på vilken undersökning man har tittat på fram till ungefär 2010. Sedan dess har de gått upp. Men den här förbättringen beror framförallt på att det har skett en markant förbättring bland elever med svensk bakgrund. Elever som har åtminstone en förälder född i Sverige. Tittar man istället på elever som har utländsk bakgrund så har det varit inte alls lika stora förbättringar. I PISA har det varit viss förbättring, men i TIMSS har vi inte egentligen sett några förbättringar alls i snitt. Och det har också gjort att skillnaderna mellan elever med svensk bakgrund och utländsk bakgrund har ökat. Och här skulle jag säga är kanske det största problemet i svensk skola idag. Vi tittar i PISA så har vi bland de största genomsnittliga skillnaderna i hela OECD när det gäller skillnaden i prestationer mellan då elever med svensk bakgrund och elever med utländsk bakgrund. Det här är en jättestor utmaning helt enkelt. Och den förbättring som vi har sett de senaste 10 åren kan vi inte skönja på samma sätt bland elever med utländsk bakgrund. Många av de här eleverna med utländsk bakgrund går också i de här skolorna i utanförskapsområden. Vi hör ofta om problemen i de skolorna, att de har väldigt låg behörighetsgrad. Jag tror att man för 2 år sedan eller 1 år sedan och sånt där, så tror jag att det var att man noterade, jag tror att det var 65% var behöriga i de här områdena i snitt mot 85 bland elever med svensk bakgrund, 80 bland elever med utländsk bakgrund utanför de här områdena. De här resultaten, det ser ju dåligt ut, men man ska också komma ihåg att det gäller våra egna betyg. Och de betygen bestäms internt av lärarna. Så vi vet inte exakt hur det ser ut ens när man tittar på de resultaten. Så jag har gjort den här rapporten delvis för att försöka identifiera skolor som ligger i de här områdena. Det är inte helt lätt. för de är anonyma. Men jag tog de skolorna som ligger i den så kallade 90, de är absolut sämst förutsättningar vad gäller andelen elever som inte har svenska som modersmål. Och andelen elever som då är klassas som att vara socioekonomiskt utsatta. Då fick jag ungefär 6% av urvalet som gick i de här skolorna, och det är väldigt, väldigt likt den andel av befolkningen som befinner sig i de här områdena, 5% ungefär 2018. Och tittar man då på de här resultaten så är det hårresande skillnader. Alltså om man tittar dels på den första kolumnen där, tittar man på, det ska stå icke utsatta skolor ska vara röd och inte utsatta skolor ska vara grön där. Så jag vet inte, det här måste ha blivit något fel. Men om man tittar på skillnaden så ser man att den är ungefär 100 PISA-poäng. Det motsvarar ungefär 4 års utbildning på högstadienivå. Om vi tittar jämför bara de elever som går i icke utsatta skolor och de som går i utsatta skolor. Men även här så ser vi att den största skillnaden är bland elever och de sämsta resultaten är bland elever med utländsk bakgrund. Så att det finns en stor skillnad bland elever som har minst en förälder född i Sverige med de här skolorna. Den är stor, men den är inte alls lika stor som om man jämför med de övriga eleverna. Den skillnaden om man jämför mellan då de här elever med svensk bakgrund som går i icke utsatta skolor och elever med utländsk bakgrund som går i utsatta skolor, så motsvarar det ungefär 5 års utbildning. Så det här är stora skillnader. Jag tror inte att man ser det riktigt när man tittar bara på behörighetsgraden. Så det här är någonting att hålla ögonen öppna för. Det är väldigt, väldigt stora skillnader. Och då den här rapporten, hur kan vi lösa de här problemen? Ja, en lösning är då den här no excuse-modellen. Jag ska kortfattat bara beskriva den, vad den handlar om. Lite kontext. Den här modellen uppstod, kan man säga, i kölvattnet av en rapport som publicerades 1983 i USA som heter Nation at Risk. Det etablerade bilden, den fick extremt genomslag i amerikansk debatt. Etablerade en bild av USA i kunskapskris som i framtiden då riskerade att spilla över på ekonomin. Och i kölvatten av den här så började man lägga mycket mer fokus, bland annat var många saker man började göra på delstatlig nivå, sen även federal nivå ända upp till 2003 med No Child Left Behind och så. Men en av de viktigaste sakerna var att man började lägga större ansvar på skolorna för låga resultat. Alltså chefen för Washington DCs offentliga skolsystem höll ett föredrag på Howard University några månader efter att den här rapporten hade publicerats, och titeln var "Vi vill ha utbildning, inga ursäkter". Det är inga ursäkter vi ska ha. Och det här, alltså Howard University är ett universitet som grundades för afroamerikanska elever. Det är 80% av eleverna där är från miljöerna. Det var därför hon höll föredraget. Just den poängen är att vi kan inte hålla på med ursäkter längre. Och det var ganska, det liknade, det kom också med en våg av forskare som började identifiera effektiva skolor i marginaliserade områden. Man började fokusera på att det går att åstadkomma resultat. Det här var kvalitativt, men det var på den vägen det var. Exempel på särdrag i den här modellen. Det finns en massa olika särdrag. Och alla skolor har naturligtvis inte exakt samma. Men man brukar prata om ett väldigt starkt fokus på elevdisciplin och elevers karaktär. Så att man kan säga det gamla fostransuppdraget i Sverige. Självdisciplin, icke-kognitiva färdigheter. Så det handlar inte bara om kunskaper. Utan det handlar om att man når kunskap ofta med ett starkt fokus på att eleverna uppförande och stärka elevers karaktär. Character education. Man har skoluniform i princip alltid. Höga förväntningar, naturligtvis på både beteende och prestationer bland eleverna. Längre skoldagar. Lärarna måste ofta vara där från 7:15 på morgonen till 5 på kvällen. Man skriver ofta förväntanskontrakt även med lärarna för hur man ska bete sig, inte bara föräldrar och elever. Man har ofta skola på lördagar, vissa lördagar i alla fall. Och man har sommarskola. I vissa fall. Just den här varianten kommer från KIPS som är kanske det mest kända exemplet av de här i USA. Och de tenderar att ha sommarskola och ha skola på vissa lördagar. Och väldigt långa skoldagar, så eleverna är i skolan och inte gör annat. Lärarledd undervisning. Det är inte liksom elevledd undervisning och mycket elevinflytande på de här skolorna, utan det är ganska traditionell undervisning. Incitamentsystem med både positiva och negativa konsekvenser för att säkerställa uppförande. Det är inte så att det här är liksom skolor där som liknar hets och Caligula. Det måste man ha, och det är den bilden vi får hela tiden när vi pratar om lärarledd undervisning Att den har fått så himla stort kulturellt avtryck så här långt senare. Men så är det. Men de här skolorna har också väldigt mycket positiva konsekvenser. Så att har man gjort något väldigt bra i enlighet med skolornas värderingar, så får man ofta kanske att föräldrarna får ett samtal hem från läraren som säger att eleverna har varit väldigt, väldigt bra. Vilket är ganska annorlunda från när jag pratar med svenska lärare, ofta det sker. Så att det är inte bara negativa konsekvenser. Det finns ett system för hur man ska ge sådana här negativa konsekvenser naturligtvis. Och de varierar. Men jag vill också betona att det finns positiva konsekvenser. Undervisning i smågrupper om nödvändigt. Alltså är det så att eleverna ligger på helt fel nivå, vilket ibland är fallet i de här skolorna, eftersom de ligger i utanförskapsområden. De har ofta 85-90% elever från etniska minoriteter, ofta en väldigt hög andel elever som inte pratar engelska. Ja, och är det så att de ligger allt för långt efter, då plockar man ofta ut dem, så kör man undervisning i små grupper om nödvändigt. Så att säga. Så det är inte inkludering i klassrummet, utan är man väldigt, väldigt långt efter, då får man specialundervisning. Under 1990-talet så såg man då en väldigt stor tillväxt av sådana här skolor, framförallt charterskolor som är USAs motsvarighet till friskolor, som började använda den här modellen i amerikanska utanförskapsområden, i innerstadsmiljöer, i Boston, i Harlem, i Chicago, you name it. Det finns i Houston. Och det har ökat och ökat och ökat. Andelen friskolor i USA som använder den här modellen har bara blivit fler och fler och fler. Så att det här är någonting som då har förändrats. Och jag vill bara betona några saker här innan jag går vidare till forskningen. Regler, vad är poängen med de här reglerna och incitamenten? Poängen är inte att man ska sitta och tjafsa om regler. Eller att vi ska stå där och pratar man jättemycket om regler och incitament, då har man nog misslyckats. För att poängen är att det här ska orsaka eller skapa normförändringar bland eleverna. Det är målet. Eleverna på den här skolan, det är det gamla fostransuppdraget som försvann i Sverige efter 1945. Man fokuserar på att de ska lära sig prata och klä sig ordentligt, komma i tid, respektera regler etc. Sådana saker, va? Som jag sa, positiva och negativa konsekvenser. Och på grund av det här så är målet, och det är det som man ser också på de här skolorna, att de tenderar att ha internaliserat de här reglerna. De tror på dem. Och de har gjort dem till sina egna. Och på det sättet så lyckas man säkerställa positivt beteende i skolorna på ett effektivt sätt. Man står inte och tjafsar hela tiden om de här sakerna, för det behövs inte. Såklart att om det sker avvikelser, vilket det naturligtvis gör, så går man tillbaka till grunderna. Men man kan till och med ha omträning då för om det har gått allt för långt i en viss riktning. Va? Men man behöver inte fokusera allt för mycket på det, så det är effektivt. Ett andra hem är ofta någonting som man hör från eleverna som går på de här skolorna. Vad beskrivs som ett andra hem just på grund av det här fostransfokuset. De ger ofta en struktur till elever som ofta saknar sån struktur utanför skolan. Och därför så ska jag säga att den här skolkulturen på de här skolorna, för de jag har besökt, så ser man att den är väldigt varm. Det är inte så att det här är någon Caligula, väldigt iskall miljö där eleverna och lärarna inte tycker om varandra och att det är någon slags konflikt mellan dem. Tvärtom. Den är traditionell, helt klart. Tysta korridorer, du pratar inte korridorerna, det är lärarledd undervisning och sånt. Men den är väldigt varm skolkultur. En rektor på en skola i Bradford som jag besökte beskrev metoden som moderlig. Och jag tror att att de använder det ordet är en indikation på vad modellen egentligen handlar om. Du har dina föräldrar hemma och så har du skolan som också ger fostran och uppfostran. Precis som i det gamla Sverige. Så det här är inget nytt. Som sagt, den här modellen, den har funnits tidigare, den har funnits i massa olika sammanhang. Och vi har haft den, det är bara att vi har gått ifrån den. Men det är liksom back to basics egentligen. Det här kan också förklara, skulle jag säga, varför elever när man pratar med dem är väldigt, väldigt positivt inställda till de här skolorna. Det är inte så att de nödvändigtvis tycker allt är kul, det ska man inte ha, men de accepterar det och de respekterar det. För de känner att det funkar och att de får någonting för det. Lärarledd undervisning, det är också en nidbild i det här, det är att de bara sitter och lyssnar på lärarna. Eleverna är väldigt aktiva på de här skolorna, men de interagerar framförallt med läraren. Väldigt mycket fram och tillbaka mellan lärare och elev, men väldigt lite mellan elever. Så det är väldigt interaktivt, men det är inte elevledd undervisning eller gruppundervisning och så. Så till forskningen. Det finns forskning från USA, England och Chile. Väldigt bra forskning från USA där på grund av att charterskolorna måste anta elever med lotterier när de har fler sökande än platser, så vet vi att vi kan hitta då kausala effekter av att gå på de här skolorna. Därför att lottas man in så har man bara haft tur, så i genomsnitt är de här grupperna väldigt, väldigt lika. Och i USA så finns det extremt starka positiva effekter av att gå på de här högskolorna. På både kort och långsiktiga resultat. I väldigt många olika kontexter. Charterskolorna generellt har inte haft så positiva effekter, utan det är de charterskolor som använder den här metoden som tenderar att ha positiva effekter. Man har även, kan säga, transplanterat sådana här metoder i experiment i offentliga skolor, så motsvarande kommunala skolor. Och effekterna har ungefär likadana. Så att det verkar vara som att det är metoderna som faktiskt driver de här effekterna. De är så stora de här effekterna på vissa av skolorna, framförallt i Boston, att bara några år, alltså 3 år ungefär, på en sån skola skulle utradera hela gapet mellan elever med utländsk bakgrund och svensk bakgrund i PISA. Det utraderar hela gapet mellan elever med afroamerikansk bakgrund och angloamerikansk bakgrund i USA på 3 år. Så att de lär sig ungefär dubbelt så mycket varje år i de här skolorna. Positiva effekter på sociala utfall, viktigt i Sverige. Det finns mindre forskning på det här, men den forskningen som finns visar på att den tenderar att minska risken för oväntade tonårsgraviditeter bland flickor. Och i princip utradera all kriminalitet bland pojkar, så att den minskar med 100%. Det är inga som hamnar i fängelse. Jämfört då med grupp. Det är väldigt få generellt som hamnar i fängelse, men det är några procentenheter, men det är ingen av de här i de studierna som har gjorts. Så det finns både positiva effekter där. Jag ska prata bara lite kort om en forskning som jag själv har gjort och som kommer ut hyfsat snart, om Dixons Trinity Academy som ligger i Bradford. En av Englands fattigaste städer. 85% av eleverna här har minoritetsbakgrund. Du går runt i den här skolan och du tror inte att du kanske är i England. Det är mycket större skolor än vad man har i Sverige också. Så att det här är liksom ingen topp bostadsområde eller så. De har använt antagningslotterier, så det gör att det är lätt att jämföra lika med lika. Jag lyckades få tag på det lotteriet och jag hittar då väldigt starka positiva effekter av att gå på de här skolorna. Det är ungefär som att man går på den skolan i 5 år. Det är som att man går 2 extra år. När man har gått 5 år så är det som att man har lärt sig 7 år i skolan. Så att det är de presterar väldigt bra. Den här blir såklart det var den första friskolan i England som fick betyget outstanding av den brittiska skolinspektionen. Också viktigt här, det är ofta också man hör att de skulle göra sig av med sämre elever. Effekterna kan inte förklaras av det eftersom lotterierna, den metoden som man använder, tar hänsyn till det. Men det intressanta är också att när man tittar på de initialt lågpresterande eleverna, de har mycket högre sannolikhet att stanna på den här skolan än de skolorna som de lottas ut till. 36 procentenheter. Så det verkar så att de är bättre på att behålla de sämre eleverna också. Vilket också är väldigt positivt. Va? De lämpar inte över dem på någon annan. Effekten drivs framförallt av pojkar som har ännu större effekter. Där är det 3 år extra ungefär. Så man går i skolan i 8 år istället för 5 år på en vanlig skola. Motsvarande, du går där i 5 år men du lär dig lika mycket som att du hade gått i en vanlig skola på 8 år. Så att det är väldigt viktigt även från synpunkten av liksom problem som vi har i utanförskapsområden som till mångt och mycket handlar om pojkar och deras involvering i kriminella kretsar och så. Va? Juridiska hinder i Sverige. Så jag tycker den här metoden är väldigt bra. Jag tycker att man borde införa den här i flera, egentligen skulle man kunna ha den i andra områden också, men framförallt utanförskapsområden i Sverige. Men problemet är att det finns juridiska hinder för att göra det här. Sedan 1991 så är elevinflytandet lagstadgat i skollagen. Så den infördes först 1991, det var 85 års skollag, men man gjorde en förändring 91 just för att man ville att eleverna skulle ha mer inflytande. Det skulle vara demokratiskt. Och bara titta, Skolinspektionen är där för att följa lagen. Så man kan inte egentligen lasta Skolinspektionen, även om det varierar mellan inspektörer. Du kan ha tur och få några inspektörer som tolkar den här lagarna lite annorlunda, men har du otur så då får du den vanliga lagen. Så jag skulle säga att de gör sitt jobb i och med att lagen ser ut som det gör. Eleverna ska ges inflytande över skola och undervisning. Och det finns många, i den här boken Glädjeparadoxen så har jag gått igenom flera inspektionsrapporter tillbaka till 2012 där man ser att hela tiden, om det är en skola som avviker från det här så får de så blir de kritiserade av Skolinspektionen och säger att de får förelägganden och sånt. Ett exempel är ju att det var ett berömt exempel där man sa att elever ska till och med få ändra skolors värderingar och etos, eller liksom värdegrund. Jag tror att på den här skolan så fick man kritisera värdegrunden, man fick debattera den, men i slutändan så fick man inte ändra den. Och de här skolorna som vi pratar om nu, skolorna, de har en väldigt en stark värdegrund som ofta baseras på hårt arbete, rättvisa, tillit, liksom starka värdeord. Skolinspektionen sa, får de inte ändra dem, då finns inte elevinflytande på riktigt och då är det emot lagen. Skoluniformer såklart är olagliga, det vet vi allihopa. I skollagen och nationella läroplan, som man tittar på Skolinspektionens rapporter, så är det väldigt tydligt att de hänvisar helt enkelt till de här paragraferna om elevinflytande, om demokrati. Även nu senast också på grund av läroplanen hänvisar till barnkonventionen, så har den också fått ett finger med i spelet, eftersom det har blivit lag sedan 2020 i Sverige och sedan 2022 finns med som en hänvisning i läroplanen. Så att det här är tydligt, men sen finns det också ett annat problem, och det är att rätten att välja kläder anses att falla under yttrandefriheten. Det är en tolkning av lagen, jag är inte jurist, så att det får väl vara så. Och det är så. Och det går att justera med ett undantag i skollagen, men det undantaget finns inte idag. Man skulle kunna säga att skolor har rätt att säkerställa en viss slags klädsel. Men det gör man inte idag och därför är det olagligt. Många av de här skolorna, eller i princip alla, har skoluniformer. Det finns forskning som också pekar på att fokuset på disciplin och skoluniformer är en viktig ingrediens i varför de här skolorna är effektiva, framförallt i Massachusetts. Så, vi behöver en juridisk översikt av skollagen och andra relevanta dokument för att inte missa olika saker och anledningar till varför den här modellen inte skulle införas. Men målet bör vara att no excuses ska kunna införas fullt ut i vilka svenska skolor som helst som vill använda den modellen. Jag säger inte att vi ska tvinga dem till att börja med i alla fall. Sen kanske. Men till att börja med så bara att de ska kunna få välja den om de faktiskt vill. Tack!
Tack Gabriel. Och vi gör så att du återkommer i panelen så släpper vi upp Katharine alldeles nyss. Men jag ska också passa på att göra reklam för då Gabriels rapport No Excuses för den som vill fördjupa sig i detta, också med goda referenser och källor för den som vill lära sig mer. But I now switch to English, and in order to give a warm welcome to Mrs. Katharine Birbalsingh. She is an educator, a British teacher, and an education reform advocate who has since 2014 been founder, co-founder and headmistress of the Michaela Community School, which is a free school established in Wembley Park outside London. In London. She will give a brief talk on her experience running the Michaela School and also the no excuse format. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I apologize that I'm unable to speak to you in Swedish. I wish I could. It's been very inspirational coming here and meeting some of you and meeting people yesterday and hearing about the struggle that you are involved in trying to change education in Sweden. And in particular that you are motivated by this, by your immigrant populations who are not able to perform at the same level as the original Swedish population. So it really heartens me that there are people here who are so interested in doing that for your country and for all of the populations in your country. Now, I run this school called Michaela. We established in 2014. It is a free school. In 2010, our education secretary at the time, called Michael Gove, allowed free schools to happen. They didn't exist before 2010, and in many ways he copied the free schools that were here in Sweden. And we opened in 2014 with just a year 7, 11-year-olds. We are now a full school with 700 children, and some of our children will go on to Oxford and Cambridge, and lots of them go on to the top we call them Russell Group universities, but the top 10, 15 universities in the country. Our intake of children is a very typical inner city intake. So I understand here that your challenges are on the outskirts of your cities. Our challenges are often in the inner city. We call them inner city schools. And I have spent my whole career, so some 25 years, working in the inner city. And I have many stories I could tell of awful disruption of lessons, fights that go on, real danger that children are in, where they're joining gangs and they hang out at the local chicken shops and get involved with people that destroy their lives. And obviously, we as a community want to stop that from happening, and schools in particular should play a vital role in doing this. Now, we, as I say, we opened in 2014. We have had a lot of, we've had to fight a lot to establish ourselves. It took us, so I had the idea in 2010 to set up the school. We didn't open up until 2014, 3.5 years later, because of all of the detractors, the people who were trying to stop us from opening the school. Now, partly this was because it was a free school and this was a very new idea, and the establishment didn't like it, but it was also because of the ideas that we are implementing, which are to do with no excuses. And in fact, I would argue that no excuses, even in the US where it started these days, has become something that people don't like to talk about because we are all made to feel bad, like we are bad people for holding children to account. When in fact, it is those of us who are holding children to account who are enabling those children to gain the knowledge and the skills that they require to make a success of their lives. And what is important to note, that if the school is not doing the job that it should be doing with those children, and the child comes from a family where the family is very supportive of the child, takes the child to art galleries and museums, sits around the dinner table and has conversations about the politics of the day. They have books at home where the children can read. They can talk to their uncles and their aunts and their cousins about a whole variety of things. They are being taught at home. This is key. If the child, on the other hand, comes from a family where there are no books, where there are perhaps quite a number of children, where perhaps the mother is on her own, where perhaps there is very little support from the outside family to be able to take the children to interesting places on holiday, to read them interesting books and so on. If that is not happening in the home, then that child is entirely dependent on their school to be able to gain the knowledge and the skills that they need to make a success of their lives. And I believe that the situation in Sweden that you are seeing right now is precisely that. There are some of you who are living in a world, I don't mean you specifically, but in Sweden, you're living in a world where you only meet your friends and the people who are like you. And your children are fine at school. And you look and you say, well, what is the problem? Everything is fine with my children. But you underestimate just how much you are contributing to your child's development. You underestimate how much the home plays a part. Now, in my opinion, all schools should be judged by the results of the children who do not have that support at home. Because that's how you know how much the school is contributing to that child. Otherwise, you say, look at how brilliant that school is, when in fact it's the family at home that's doing all the work. So if it is the case that many of your immigrant children are not performing, what that tells you, this is the canary singing, saying, look, there is a problem with the school system in Sweden, okay? There is a problem, because otherwise your immigrant children would be doing very well, but they're not doing well. And that is because up until now you have been fooled by what the family is doing in the background to support those children. It is also the case that when you bring in various different cultures, And you have a mix, which is wonderful. You've got I am the result of a multicultural family. My father is Indian Guyanese. My mother is Jamaican. I have, so I'm not against multiculturalism, but it comes with its challenges. Okay, and when you have everyone who is the same, there is a culture which everyone buys into, and it's the same culture. And you mustn't underestimate how much that supports a school, how much it enables a school or an entire community to succeed. When people are coming from various different cultures, they have different foods, they have different ways of doing things, different things they appreciate, and so on. It is much more difficult to make that succeed. Not to say that it cannot happen. Of course it can happen. But it means that Sweden needs to look at itself and say, well, what changes do we have to make to ensure that we can be successful? Not just with our Swedish heritage families, but with all of our families. Because otherwise, you are saying to your immigrant communities that they do not matter. You are saying, yes, we've invited you in, but we're not going to give you an education that will work. We're going to make sure that your communities fail. We are going to make sure that you end up without many choices when you leave school, and that you are the ones who will always be doing the jobs that perhaps other people do not want to do. That is where you will end up. Now, what is it that you need to do? There are three things I would say. Gabriel very kindly wrote out his PowerPoint for me in English, and having spoken to him at length before, I know the sorts of things he was saying to you this morning. And it's interesting reading through his PowerPoint, because everything he is saying about this new no excuses model is everything that I believe in. So everything you just heard him say, I am saying again now. Which is that? There are three things that I tend to talk about when talking about Michaela and what makes us different. And just to say about Michaela, we have 800 visitors a year to the school. You are very welcome to come to London and come and have lunch with the children and have a tour of the school. Most of our visitors are teachers. They come from around the world, and they come because of the reputation of the school, the reputation of our children, of being kind, decent human beings who look after each other, who are tender with each other, who are happy, who also perform very, very well in terms of their academic results. Now, there is a grade that schools get in England from when your children join in year 7, and then when they finish their what we call GCSE exams in year 11, they finish these exams. So they spend those 5 years working on all kinds of things, but eventually ending up with exams in history, geography, science, maths, English, and so on. And what the government does is it tracks the progress that is made for the children when they arrive in year 7 and then when they leave in year 11, to be able to make a judgment of all of the schools to see whether or not the school is doing a good job. Are they helping these children progress? Now, our children we are a typical inner city intake that I have worked with all my lives at all schools. Last year, we got the highest progress in the country for that year 7 to year 11 journey that the children make. And for, in 2019, we were the 5th highest. We are doing very well academically. Now, in addition to that, as I say, the children are also good citizens. They are people who you want to meet and have a conversation with. So the first thing that I would say is our discipline. I understand in speaking to some of you here that discipline is a word you don't even talk about in Sweden, okay? Now, as a foreigner here, I don't understand how it is that children of any background could possibly succeed without parents and teachers saying to them, this is right and this is wrong. And we would like you to do the right thing. And you have agency as a child, so you can decide. You can sit and listen in your lesson, or you can punch your friend. Punching your friend is wrong. Listening and being a nice person is good. You want to be able to give children the option to choose between right and wrong, and then you want to be able to reward them when they do the right thing, and to punish them when they do the wrong thing. And when I say punish, I do not mean that you are going to be beating them. I mean that you put them into a detention after school for 20 or 30 minutes, they do a bit of work, and then you have a conversation with them where you say, that was naughty. I understand too that the word naughty is something that you don't really participate in. Children are naughty. In fact, I would argue that all children are naughty. Every single one of them. Even I, growing up, was naughty. Okay? Now, all of us, all of you were naughty too. Okay? And the reason why you stopped being naughty is because somebody took the time to tell you no. Okay? Somebody loved you enough to say no. And this is a good point, which is that we are made to feel bad for holding our standards high for children, when those of us who are holding our standards high are the ones who love the children more. And I say this very seriously. We love them more than we love ourselves. Because the people who lower their standards for children and say, it's okay, don't do your homework, it's okay, you don't have to sit up straight and turn up on time and dress yourself properly and be polite and etc. Those people, it is because they care more about how they feel in that moment than they do about the long-term progress of that child. So in that moment, they feel bad. He comes from a poorer background, so I don't want to tell him he has to do his homework. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I know life might be difficult for him, so I don't want to tell him he must be on time. That makes me feel awkward, and I don't like feeling like this. And because I feel awkward, I'm going to let it go, and I'm going to let him have very low standards for himself. And when he fails school later, well, I'll blame it on poverty. I will blame it on the fact that he is an immigrant child. I will say, well, it's not me. I'm a good teacher. I run a good school. And look, my Swedish children are doing very well, so it's obviously not to do with me. It's to do with the fact that he's an immigrant. Now, I haven't done anything wrong. So in that moment, what the teacher is doing, and what we are all doing, because it is not just teachers who are making these decisions, it's your policymakers, it's your politicians, it is your public generally, who feel uncomfortable with this, and because that feeling is more important to them than the feeling of, I have a duty. As adults, we have a job to do. If we have children in our country, it is our job to lead those children and to make sure they know the difference between right and wrong. To tell them when they are late, you are late, therefore you will have a detention. Guess what happens when you give them detentions for being late? They are no longer late. This is what happens, okay? At my school, these teachers who visit, they come and they say, but how is it that the children are so well behaved? Why are they all looking at the teacher? How is it that all their hands are going up and they are participating and they are really keen on learning? And I say, because this is now the culture. This is now the norm. We have created norms in the school where the children know what is expected of them. And that means that, 10-15% of the children are the ones who go into detention. The majority of them are just doing the right thing now because it has become part of who they are. Now that's the discipline. The second thing that I would say is the teaching. So the teaching is of the direct instruction model that I know Gabrielle just spoke about. We tell the children things. Now, many people look at me when I say that and they say, well, obviously the teacher tells the children things. That's normal. It is not normal in 2023. It is not normal in Sweden, it is not normal in England or in the US or anywhere in the Western world, okay? I've spent much time, I've been to Australia, I've been to New Zealand, I've been all over the place. Everyone, all of us, so you'll be pleased to know, all of us are struggling with the same problem, okay? And this problem has developed over the last 50 years where we have become very relaxed about discipline. And when it comes to teaching, what has happened is that people who were in school, they look and they think, oh, I was bored at school. The teacher used to talk a lot, and I got bored. Let's make it more fun and interesting. Let's play games. Let's have the children teach each other. Why have the teacher teach them? The teacher is boring. I mean, the teacher may have a PhD. The teacher might actually know the subject, but who cares? The 12-year-olds can teach each other. That is much more fun. And it may be fun, but I can tell you that the children don't learn very much, okay? So what happens at our school, because we are telling them things, and we are giving them knowledge, they are soaking it up, the hands are going up. The more knowledge that children get, the more knowledge they want. Because what you are doing is you are creating coat pegs in your brain, in the child's brain, and when you give them a new piece of knowledge, it hangs onto that coat peg. And then you give them more knowledge, and it hangs on. And they are developing this schema of knowledge in their heads where they are understanding the world. And so after a while, this just becomes what they want. They love it. They love the knowledge. And I tell you that children will forgive any number of detentions if they are learning, okay? If you try and give them detentions and you are not teaching them properly, they won't have that, okay? But if they are learning, they understand. Oh, yes. It is even the case that we have children who will thank their teachers for giving them a detention. This happens. You know, once a man, a PR man, you know, he said to me, "You mustn't tell people that. They'll think you're crazy." That's what he said. And I said, "But this is true. This is what happens." Our children will say, "Thank you to Mr. So-and-so, you know, thank you for giving me that detention because I've now learned my lesson and I'm going to work harder." It is not a coincidence that we have got this amazing progress at our school. It's happening because of what we are doing. So, discipline and then teaching. The third thing are the values that we teach the children. So, the children are immersed in the values of understanding personal responsibility. If your homework isn't done, that's on you. I don't want to hear about your little brother who gave you a problem. You have to bring in your homework. We give them a sense of duty, a sense of team. When you get the detention, you are letting down not just yourself, but the whole class. We give them a sense of belonging, a belonging to the school, belonging to the values that we've got. Now, I understand that in Sweden, that the children are able to change the ethos and the values of the school. I have never heard of anything more crazy in my life, okay? It is crazy. How can 13-year-olds be deciding the values and the ethos of the school? We teachers, and the thing is, ultimately, I do feel that this is a real disrespect that Sweden has for your teaching profession. You know, your teachers matter. They know, and they know what is required. And how can you say that 12 and 13 and 14-year-old children know more than your teachers? It's wrong. So all of us need to come together in that fight, and in each of your domains, we must go forward and spread the word about no excuses, about the success that the charter schools have had, that we have had, Trinity Dixon's in England as well. There are other schools. We are not the only ones that are doing this and that are transforming the lives of the marginalized and disadvantaged children who depend entirely on their schools in order to gain those skills and that knowledge to make a success of their lives. And as I say, I'm so inspired by all of you in joining me in this fight to make Swedish education better. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Katharine. I think we'll let the Principal Damian come up, and then we'll save the questions for the panel that we'll have at the end. But now, thank you so much. I would like to introduce Damian. Sorry, I have the wrong note here. Sorry. I would like to introduce Damian Brunker. Damian is educated in the United Kingdom as a teacher and came to Sweden, I think, about 15 years ago?
17.
17 even. And you have since then been working inside the Swedish school system, and you're currently the principal or rector at Internationella Engelska Skolan in Eskilstuna, which is situated, it's an F to 9 school with a lot of students. And please tell us more about your school, your neighborhood, neighborhood and the challenges you face and what you're actually accomplishing.
Tack så jättemycket, Gustav. Jag ska presentera på engelska för Katharines skull idag, men jag ska börja att säga att jag är så stolt att vara här idag och representera mina elever och min personal och mina föräldrar. Jag älskar Eskilstuna och Fröslunda. Och lyssna inte bara till mig idag, kom och besök min skola efter presentationen idag. Jag kan visa dig hur det är. And of course, it's a huge privilege and honor to be presenting alongside Katharine Birbalsingh, CBE, in my opinion, one of the greatest principals in the world today. So thank you, Katharine. Okay. Here we go. So, yes, I work for Internationella Engelska Skolan, and actually this year we are celebrating 30 years of No Excuses. And Barbara Bergström is our founder, and if you've met Barbara, you will know that she is absolutely a no excuses kind of lady. And I think Engelska Skolan is the closest you'll get to a legal no excuses model here in Sweden, and that's certainly something that I promote in IS Eskilstuna. We believe in a command of the English language. Svenska är lika viktigt faktiskt i min skola särskilt, but bilingualism is something we believe in. Up to 50% of the education is run through the English language. We believe in high academic expectations. We have to believe, no matter what the background of those students, they can achieve great things with us, and we do. And of course, a safe and orderly environment, and discipline is one of Barbara's favorite words, something I'll be talking about soon. Barbara's just releasing a book. I have to plug it now. It's called Tough Love. It's being re-released for our 30th anniversary, so do check it out. You'll find the history and the battles that Barbara's had to wage in order to make Engelska Skolan the success it is today. Okay, something about IS Eskilstuna then. 1,179 students, 40 classes, third largest school in Sweden today, and up to the latest statistics anyway show that 77% of my students have a foreign background. It's actually higher, I think, this year, and you know, compared to the national average, that's extremely high. About half of my parents don't have post-16 education, so they've not been to gymnasium or high school. And we offer, to give you an idea of the diversity, we offer up to 16 languages, mother tongue, and over 500 of my students are doing a mother tongue. Many more are entitled Arabiska. Arabic is the biggest, but Somaliska, and if you're watching Nafete, they're going to really love that, is also well-represented language in my community. It is a challenging environment, and I just want to say a little bit about Fröslunda in particular and the current state of Sweden. And this is where it gets very, very serious. It's been wonderful to talk about, you know, the change that's required. Many people who are watching this today, and many people who are here in the audience, you know, you please do not underestimate your influence in listening to this presentation today and reading Gabriel's report. What's happening in Sweden right now is coming at an absolutely huge, unquantifiable, tragedy, a cost to society. Sweden has the highest shootings per capita. Sweden has the highest shootings per capita in the world. Eskilstuna has the highest per capita in Sweden, in Europe, sorry, not the world. But we're not far off the United States at the moment. Yeah, and many of these shootings are taking place. You know, 15-year-olds are shooting each other. You know, school children are shooting each other. It's an absolute tragedy. And I won't go into too many details, but obviously last year there were 32 shootings in my community. Almost every single one of those shootings, with us being such a large school, we were connected. It could have been a sibling, it could have been a brother, it could have been a father, it could have been a boyfriend, it could have been a student. We're always connected. And my staff and my students have seen horrific things. Horrific things. So change has to happen. This has to be more than just a nice presentation that was interesting. Change has to happen for the future of Sweden. Unemployment is very high in my community, and obviously, you know, the students coming to us, need a lot of care. There's a lot of poverty. You see it when we do something called a meet and greet in the morning when we meet the students, even if it's minus 16 degrees Celsius. We're at the door, we're greeting them, and you'll see the kids coming in their flip-flops sometimes and their tracksuit bottoms without a coat. You know, you can really pick up on the need there. Okay, so that's a little bit about the context. I'm very proud because obviously we're doing something right, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how it connects to No Excuses. We don't have a förädlingsvärde or a progress measure in Sweden when it comes to measuring academic success or kunskapsresultat. But I will show you the results from my school from 2022 in comparison with some national statistics. This is andel elever som var behörig till gymnasieskolan. Okay? Yrkesprogram ligger där. Så 97% av mina elever var behörig till gymnasiet. National snittet är 85%. We even beat IS as an organisation, which I'm very proud of, because we have the highest socio-economic index of the 46 schools in the organisation. So you can see there, the red is the national, the light blue is my school. There's something we're very proud of, something we're continuing to work with. I can then break these down. The source here is Skolverkets statistik, by the way, so you can access these. You can see here, these are the results last year of my students who were born in Sweden but came from a foreign background. And you can see, pretty good result there, yeah? Here are the results for those students who were born abroad, yeah? So about a third of my students last year in grade 9 were born abroad. And these are the kinds of the results that we're getting. I will also point out, though, something we're continuing to work on. There's a lot of subjects when you're age 16 in Sweden, 17 in total. And you can see there that, yeah, still 64% of my students who were born abroad from grade 9 last year passed all subjects. That means, you know, quite a number there didn't pass all subjects. And I'm being honest about this because quite often in the debate, you know, particularly in Engelska skolan, we get accused of betygsinflation, glädjebetyg och så vidare. Jag säger till mina lärare, det är viktigt att ni står bakom. That you stand behind the grades that you set. And if we have fails, well, that's a tragedy. But we've done everything to get them through. But yes, some of my students do fail. Yeah? But we have to stand behind those grades. And we're very proud of these, and we continue to build and work on them. I sometimes get told, but Damian, you're creaming off all the best educated parents' kids, aren't they? They're choosing your school. Not so. You can see here that, you know, quite a lot of my students from grade 9 last year had parents whose education stopped when their parents got to the age of 16. And you can see the light blue bars there are much higher than the national. So these are the results we're building on, and we're very proud of those. So, when you see our national test to final grade results, you'll notice that they are very aligned as well because we work very hard with that aspect. Okay, success factors, I think, are some of the things I've been asked to talk about today. The first one is, you know, you have to be uncompromising, and this is something I've definitely learned from Barbara Bergström and also Katharine Birbalsingh. But you have to be uncompromising here in Sweden, of course, within the realms of the law, and in my context, your personal safety as well, because the state of Sweden doesn't have that much influence in my community. So, the words, as well as the ethos, the words that I use with my staff to help us forge a school culture that's about no excuses, is 4 words that are really important to the school. The first is discipline. The second is knowledge. Then we have school spirit. And then we have community. And these 4 words I'm going to talk to you about now, about how I kind of work with these within my school. So first of all, discipline. To talk about discipline as a method in Sweden, as Katharine mentioned before, is problematic because it conjures up images of a draconian 1940s or 50s style school where the teacher's walking around with a stick and bashing the students. So I talk about discipline as being an outcome. It's a desired goal as opposed to a method, even though there are some methods involved there. And it's to create self-discipline, självdisciplin. Because self-discipline is the key to success to life, isn't it? Particularly for young people that live in a world full of fast fixes and quick apps and press a button and everything's easy, yeah? Reaching a goal is doing lots and lots of small, really boring things sometimes and sticking at it to get to the final product. Where has that gone in our education system, that concept? It's so important that we bring that back and lift it. And of course, this creates grit. This is something we believe in. And building character. Building character. Concepts such as respecting each other, kindness are really important. I know that Michaela believes a lot in that. The next one is that age-old debate between sort of rules, relationships, and routines. Yeah? And I often get teachers coming to me and say, rules and routines are not important, it's all about relationships. It's just about relationships. And if you've read Battle Hymn of the Tiger Teachers, which is a book that Catherine's teachers put together, there's a brilliant section in there about relationships. And I say to teachers who come to me from that angle, I say, all relationships are based on boundaries anyway. You know, if you go out to the pub and one of your friends has had the haircut and it looks bad, you're going to say, ha ha, you look stupid. Yeah, says you're not going to do that with me though, are you? Because I'm your boss. So, and we've got a relationship. So every relationship has boundaries. And that's so important that we work with positive relationships in ISS Stuna, but not at the expense of high expectations. Yeah, that's so important. And then, of course, discipline, the routines, the students lining up, them standing behind their desks and saying, good morning, Mr. Brunker. These create sort of, a sense of togetherness and belonging. Some of my students, when I first came to the school 3 years ago, I said, Mr. Brunker, why do we have mobile phones? And why are we not allowed mobile phones? And why are we not allowed chewing gum and all this sort of stuff? And I say, well, is there anything else in your life that's about rules that's really important to you? And they're like, and there's 3 of them there, 3 girls, and I'm sort of waving my hand around, because the 3 of them are there with a hijab on. I say, Islam? Isn't that all about rules for you? And they say to me, oh yeah, it is. And I says, and what does that give your community? What does that give you in terms of a sense of belonging and everybody doing things at the same time, in the same way? Oh yeah. I said, that's what we're trying to do here, just without the God bit. Yeah? Because that's illegal. Okay, so then, knowledge. And we talk about elever and flutande here. And for me, knowledge is influence. And the KIPP schools, KIP from the US, knowledge is power. And Katharine's kind of, mantra is true. All young people just want a feeling that they're good at something that's going to lead them to a situation where they can influence their environment in a positive way. Yeah? They all want to be successful. And unfortunately, in my community, many young people are influenced in the wrong direction. It starts with, oh, here's a free mobile phone. And then it's a case of, oh, here's a free bicycle. Go and fetch that packet for me. And then it's, if you do this for me, I'll give you that baseball cap and these clothes. And then, hey, look, this is a pistol. Feel that. Whoa, isn't that amazing? Yeah, imagine the power a 13, 14-year-old boy feels with a pistol in his hand. Yeah, this happens in my community every day. Yeah, and I have to replace that with, gosh, you got top marks in that math test. Fantastic. Wow, you actually got a B for your SO assignment. That's fantastic. Giving them a sense of self-esteem based on knowledge. Yeah, it's not about the application of knowledge, and that's what we've lost from the curriculum. Big focus in my school on literacy and numeracy. That's what students need. And of course, it's about a certain teaching style, which is about being the sage on the stage, as I am today, not the guide on the side. And the group work and the discussions, kids need to be taught. Academic rigor and regular testing is very much part of my school. Okay, the next one is school spirit. I want my students to contribute and belong. Staff and student engagement is absolutely important. So we believe in rewarding and recognizing. We believe in ceremonies and symbols and rituals because it gives us that sense of belonging. You're all welcome to come to our end-of-term ceremony in Stiga Arena. It's fantastic because that also creates a sense of togetherness and belonging. And finally, community. I'm not lying when I said, my first couple of weeks in the school, I went out with an information. Snälla, komma till föräldrarådmötet klockan 5. 6 people show up. And I've got 1,170 kids. Yeah, and we went out on all channels to get them in. But the minute I invited them in for a Middle Eastern culture night, and I'd play Irish traditional music, because I'm actually Irish, and I played my drum, and I did a video, and they dressed us up, and they brought their food. We connected, and we built trust. Because a lot of my parents don't trust the state of Sweden, yeah? We celebrate diversity, but under one school culture, and we believe in optimism, visibility to transform. And most recently, we are now in cooperation with the local municipality with an SSPF initiative, which is quite unique for a private school. social authorities, schools, police, fritids och unga, we're working together. I have 2 social authorities secretaries attached to my school. We meet monthly. These kinds of, samverkansbetydelse is so important. I'm working with lots of different individuals and agencies in the community. I'm cooperating with local music artists, working with the kids, just to give some of those examples of what we're doing. Conscious of time now. How are we doing? Okay, good. Then, of course, I am incredibly well-resourced as a school. And I think, to be organised for success is an important one. This is my student care team, F to 9. And you can see just how many people. I have 3 nurses, 3 counsellors, 3 social pedagogues, 3 special educators that just sit in the team. Yeah, I have 4 assistant principals in total, 1 focused completely on gang criminality, and I have a qualified careers counsellor that works with us as well, all under one giant team. And for that, I'm so very grateful to our huvudman, of course, with whom I have an incredible dialogue, Engelska Skolan. So, in short then, no excuses. What's my view on this? For the Swedish context, yes. Yes to a change in the educational paradigm, a change in the laws. I think what we need in this country to impact those laws is a coming together, and an analysis of Swedish culture and how it has changed over the years, how we view children. A good metaphor is when I first arrived in Sweden, and I was waiting in a queue in a supermarket, and there was this 2-year-old child who kind of spread themselves across the belt, and the woman at the till, and there was a mother there, and there was a big queue, and the mother leant over to a child who said, "Do you think it's a good idea you get down? Is it time to get down now?" And we were waiting there, and I was like, what's going on, And I married a Swedish lady. She's wonderful, my wife, but we've had tension over the years about how we view that concept of bringing up children. And I think we have to think carefully about that. Yes to discipline routines. Yes to warm authority or warm tradition. No to the authoritarian approach, because that doesn't achieve anything. Yes to knowledge teaching and empirical research leading the way, which it is now. And yes to policies and actions that create a consistent sense of togetherness, belonging, safety, and security. Very quickly, just to end, we are in a unique position in the world, Sweden, and you've probably seen the Engelhardt-Welzel cultural map of the world before. Sverige, utanför the rest of the world in terms of cultural values. We are now responsible for bringing in most of the world into that. And in that respect, I think we have to think about some of those traditional values that this country had in order to meet that challenge, because it makes sense. Time's up. Thank you very much. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you, Damian, and you're not finished yet, so please come up, and please, Gabriel and Katharine, also come up, and let's have a discussion on these issues. Now, it's interesting, we have this concept of no excuses, and of course there are differences between them, but if I understand you correctly, you will, both of you, and also Gabriel, will emphasize discipline, teaching or knowledge, values, and then community, which you didn't know, probably your 4th, it's even in your name. So, of those 4, which one do you think is the most important, Damian? If you have to stress one of them, where do you get your structure and your success?
Discipline and knowledge, probably the most important, but I think you can't have those 2 alone. I think you need a combination of, and I think those things contribute to a good sense of school spirit and community. It boils down to that balance between, are we aiming for an authoritarian approach in the school, where students are kind of drilled, or is it a balance between that and doing things that give them the opportunity to contribute, whether it's clubs or sporting events and those sorts of things. So for me, it's a combination.
Okay. And Gabriel, what does the research say? Is any of these more important than the others, do you think?
I mean, yes. Some of them, some of the research, it varies somewhat between the different studies, but if you look at the research from Massachusetts, it's the discipline, school uniform, cold calling they also use, which also has been having a positive impact, basically not raising your hand, you just tell the student which student should reply in the classroom. So there are other research suggesting the small group kind of pulling out students who are falling behind is also an important part. So we don't really know exactly, difficult to pinpoint exactly what of these ingredients, or which ones are actually the most important ones. But as I said, in some research it is the discipline and the uniform actually that have been linked to the highest performance.
So if I understand you correctly, it's a mixed, it's a good mix, you need all parts of it, but then I would assume that the key concept here is number one, the leadership, who gives the vision for this, but also the staffs and the people working there. Katharine, how do you get the teachers to do the job?
Yeah, it's a good question. To a certain extent, the teachers who apply to come and work at our school, it is self-selecting because they wouldn't apply if they know about our reputation. But we do a lot of work on training to get them to understand what we're about and deliver what we want. So when Gabrielle talks about cold calling, for instance, that's a standard thing that you would find in all of our classrooms. And the reason why, because all of the things he just mentioned, ultimately taking children out of lessons, for instance, to give them individual tuition, all of that is about holding the children to account. When you cold call and you say, what's the answer, and they haven't put their hand up, if they haven't been listening, they're caught out in that moment. So that's why cold calling works. Everything he said there, it's about holding them to account. It's about making them recognize that somebody's watching. Somebody cares enough to make sure that they reach certain standards. It's interesting when you say about community, I just include that in the whole sense of values. So when I spoke about belonging, that's the same thing as community. Now, all three of those things are really important because when they feel they belong, and they feel as if they are loved, and they know their teachers are on their side, they are happy to be held to account. They want that from you. I mean, my whole life, I've always found that the teachers that, so outside of Michaela, before then, I've always found that the children prefer the teachers who are more strict. They want the classroom where there is order and structure, and where the teacher is saying, that's not good enough, get me better work, do better writing, do more homework. They love that because children depend on us to push them further than they would go. It's like when you go to the gym. You go to the gym, and if you're on your own, you do a few push-ups, you run a bit on the treadmill. But if you have a personal trainer saying, another one, and you're going, please leave me alone, and they're saying, no, get to 10, get to 20, and so on, you are more likely to achieve. It's the same with a teacher and a pupil.
And it's not only personal teachers, it's why we go to groups, or where I'm scheduled, a partner for the tennis game. There's someone else who holds me accountable.
Yes, exactly.
Now, Damian, what about recruiting to your school? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a nice position right now in that I think a lot of people are interested in working for us. I spend the first half an hour of the interview trying to put them off. I think and I mean that sincerely, it's important that they understand what they're taking on board, what I believe in. Induction starts in the interview, that they understand what the vision of the school is, what my expectations are, and then it's going to be tough. It's hard working in my school, and I have incredible people that are full of grit, and I have nothing but admiration for most of them, incredible people. So yeah, I mean, I'm very clear with the job ads, and I'm very clear in the interview.
And what about the students and the teachers? Do they stay, or do they leave? Do people stay? Are they happy being there, or do you have a turnover of both students and staff?
I've been there for 3 years, so it's quite common when a new leader enters the arena that there might be a bit of turnover. So that definitely applied to me. But I think I've got 140 staff or something. I've only 6 new people this year, so it's very stable right now. I'm very grateful for that. Students, though, is a different situation. With such high unemployment in Internationella Engelska Skolan, we find that families are moving not just within Sweden but abroad and then coming back. And many of my families have links to family all over the world, and they're constantly moving. So this is a challenge in terms of creating continuity for the children. And I think many principals in that situation will hear me on that one and think, yeah, that's true.
We've heard that also from other schools in similar areas in Sweden, that once the family gets somewhat stabilized, they find a job, they kind of opt to live in another housing environment and try to move on. Is that also true for teachers, that they also get recruited into other schools? Do they come and get your teachers because they're good?
Oh, do you mean that they're hunting my teachers? No, hands off.
Now, Gabriel, when you look at the research and you look at the challenges of any school system, one of the interesting facts is that in many cases, the most senior and experienced teachers are usually in the upper scale of schools. Well, it's really hard to recruit the senior, more experienced teachers. Is there a difference here for KIPP schools or no excuse schools, or do you have any suggestions on how we can address this issue?
So the KIPP schools and the schools that apply a no excuses paradigm in America tend to hire very much from Teach for America. So this is kind of well, it used to be at least, it was more of an elite kind of teacher training program. Fast track, and you had to teach in an inner city environment. So I think there is something called Teach for Sweden, but I don't really hear much about what they do, if they're involved in the kind of suburban schools in Sweden or not. But they tend to hire a lot of younger teachers. And that has been successful. But obviously, if you have a pool of teachers who have to go and teach the first 2 years in one of these schools, well, it's going to be easier. In England, I think when it comes to teacher supply, I think Katharine is probably better to talking about that one.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's interesting. So in the same way that the charter schools take from Teach for America, the equivalent in England is Teach First, so that's what it's called, and the vast majority of our teachers come from Teach First, and they often have done 2 or 3 years in a similar demographic type school, so they have the experience of dealing with more challenging intakes, and then they come to us, and we do retrain, because we are trying to get them to live and breathe the idea of direct instruction, the values. It's always very interesting to listen to either Gabriel or Damian, because Damian speaks and I just hear myself. He's just saying the same things, When he says he puts people off, I'm like, yep, that's what I do, everything. I'm like, yep, all the same stuff that he was just talking about to all of you. And something to say, which is that, all of these charter schools in America, Dixon's, as you said, and other schools in England, and the 3 of us here, if we are all in agreement, I mean, Damian and I met, some years ago, but we're not friends, we're not in touch with each other, and yet everything he said today is exactly the same stuff that I have found works in my context in London. So it's not just a coincidence. We're all saying the same things, and we have all come to this independently, and that's because it's true. This is what works,
Yeah. And then we come to the obstacles that we then face in Sweden today. Damian, what kind of obstacles do you see in the current setup of the Swedish educational system that kind of holds you back or are limiting your opportunity to do more?
Well, of course, what we're talking about is going back to sort of more traditional values, in a sense, and traditional approaches. And as I showed in the map, Sweden, is almost so proud of being the most progressive, the most liberal, the most kind of avant-garde in that respect. And there's a challenge in that. So of course, and the values of a country, permeate through into the laws and the legal system. So I think we need to have a broad discussion on some of the cultural values affecting schools, and I think that should be across the political spectrum. It sometimes concerns me a little bit that those progressive values. I mean, this is just an observation. You might not agree with me, but some of those progressive values, tend to be from sort of left, and the ones promoting traditional values tend to be sort of centred to the right. I think we need to come together and look at research, empirical research, and take political ideology out of education. That's a massive task, I think, and maybe I'm a bit naive even to mention it. So I think that's an important factor. The Swedish education system is probably one of the most decentralized in Europe. Maybe Gabriel can comment, has looked at a lot of others in that respect. But that's also a challenge. When we want change, there are so many different actors that need to be involved in that discussion. And then do we get to where we finally need to be based on this, so those would be my comments on that. Yeah.
Well, Gabriel, if you then look at the legislation that we do have, you mentioned some of it. I mean, it's almost like we have a multicultural society, but a kind of monocultural education society that says, this is the way you should do it, it should be student-oriented, it should be. Yeah. And anyone who wants to go outside of that becomes illegal.
Yep.
Is that a fair way of doing it? And what
fair
would
way
you
of
suggest we do?
describing it, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we went from a system which was more like no excuses up until the Second World War, moving in more of an American pedagogical direction towards Dewey, towards what we call progressive education, so more child-centered learning. At the same time as Sweden went from a very homogeneous society to becoming a very heterogeneous society. So absolutely, I think we are forcing schools to be, well, might work. I'm not saying that it's actually good for students with a Swedish background either, in that sense. I mean, yeah, they perform well now, but they could probably perform even better. Think about the potential if we were changing the whole system in this direction. But what I'm saying to begin with is just to focus on those schools where we have the biggest challenges and allow them to at least allow them to opt for this approach if they want to. That's, I think, is the. I don't understand why that should be so controversial.
Right. So there's a number of legal requirements that need to change in order for people to try and see how this works even further than they currently are able to do. Because we do have tough love, no excuse schools in Sweden.
But it's not the same thing. I have to say that. It's not. We do not have Katharine's approach in Sweden. Right. And, it would be illegal. Yeah. So, as I said, I'm not a lawyer. So I would ask, maybe the school commission at the Confederation of Swedish Enterprise could put a lawyer on that and go through the laws that have to change, or specifically the education law and the curriculum, and perhaps the interaction with some of the other laws, for example, the Constitution, in terms of how we interpreted freedom of expression to be part of our decision regarding clothes and all of that stuff. So I've just mentioned a few of them in the report. Again, I think we need a full legal review.
Yeah. So look into that. Yeah. Now, leaving that, because we also have a broader educational discussion here in Sweden. One of them is on curriculum and phonics that you also have mentioned in different aspects on how we promote literacy. In the UK, you have had a number of years of governments who have introduced different kinds of reforms on both knowledge-rich curriculum and phonics. But you don't have to follow that. You have your own?
Yes, so schools are a lot more free than they are here in Sweden. And so the principal of the school can decide, in a way, what they want to do for their children. Right. But there is an inspectorate, and there is also the systems to hold us to account by judging the schools on the exams, the national exams that the children take. And yes, more recently, phonics, I say more recently, in the last 20 years, phonics has embedded in England. And so all of the primary schools will teach it. But ultimately, what is phonics? What is it? It's the same as in any subject. Every subject has its phonics. So what I mean by that is every subject can be broken down to the basics. So when you are learning the piano, you need to do scales. The scales in music is the equivalent to phonics when learning a language. It's breaking it down to the smallest bits, drilling those small bits. Once that is understood, you move to the next bit and to the next bit. And so the foundation that the child is building on each time is solid. I think one of the mistakes that many of us make in education is that we don't really know what the children know. When you next visit a school, ask them about their knowledge of history. Ask them questions. Ask them about their knowledge of science and geography. See whether or not they're able to answer you and how articulate they are in explaining their thoughts about these things. Because I think people often, when talking to children, what do you want to be when you grow up? Who's your favorite teacher? What do you do for fun? Those are the questions we ask them. We don't actually inquire to find out how knowledgeable they are, which of course is what schools are meant to be doing, right? Like that's the main job of a school, is to give them knowledge and skills. But we never ask the children these kinds of questions, and so we don't actually know what the schools are doing. So ask, and then you can compare. Visit one school, ask similar questions, go to another school, ask similar questions, and see, are they able to respond or not? And I think, sadly, unfortunately, you find in many places, it just, the children really don't know very much. And we underestimate just how little they know. You know, I remember once teaching a class. So I taught French. This was my subject, and they had been at the school for 5 years. They were just about to go off to take those GCSE exams, and I referred to the Holocaust. I was just talking, and I said something about the Holocaust, and one of the boys said, "What's that? What's that?" And admittedly, the other children were kind of going, "Come on, you know what the Holocaust is." And he didn't know what the Holocaust was. And I immediately went to my principal, shouting and saying, "This is ridiculous. How can we have a child who doesn't know what the Holocaust is?" And his response was, "Oh, come on, Catherine. The child that he was, you know, he wasn't a high-achieving pupil. And it was just, well, that's the way that it is. It's unacceptable. I'm sorry, it's unacceptable that children are leaving school and don't know what the Holocaust is, right? I just thought it's unacceptable that they're leaving not knowing how to read. That they don't know that they're not numerate, you know? This should concern us all. And the reason why we are all in agreement here is because these methods work. And what concerns me is the legal situation in Sweden, of course. Because obviously your principals are not going to go against the law. They can't. So work needs to be done with the politicians to get that to change.
And we also need to work on the curriculum and how we break down knowledge and make sure that every kids get caught up. Is that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there were some welcome changes, or at least noises, I should say, when it came to revising the national curriculum, but it fell short of what's needed. There was, you know, there's supposed to be a bit more focus now on factor kunskap and things like that, but it didn't really take off as it should. And it really was just, here's the curriculum. We're not really going to change it. We'd like you to look at it from this perspective. So it's far short from where we need to be. Yeah, and I welcome, though, the recent decision to investigate the grading system. That's also broken. And we have to work with it as best we can. But both are broken, and both are failing our children. And there has to be change on that front as well. We work with knowledge teaching in ISS Skolan. I think reaching the teaching body as a whole is a challenge in that respect too, is that many of our teachers have come through a system that's promoting progressive values, particularly at teacher training level, and to actually persuade them and convince them that there's a lot now with, you know, cognitive psychology and learning that's proving that some of these traditional methods work. Not cognitive neuroscience, that often gets mixed up in the media. It's a different thing. But definitely, you know, think about Willingham and others, you know. So, yeah, and we work with phonics and dual coding and these sorts of concepts to embed language at a kind of a skills base early on.
So it's a mixed approach, but basically, and we're unfortunately running out of time, if to sum this up, we have challenges in our school system. They seem to be going in the right direction, but not nearly to meet the challenges that we do have. No excuse schools seem to work very well. It seems to work in particular to reduce crime, to improve knowledge, to improve accessibility to the next stage of education. The results are fairly spectacular. You can read about them here in Gabriel's excellent report. You will find it online after this seminar. It's a mix of building hope and having people held accountable. And so with that, I think we want to thank our panelists today and give them a warm applaud. And hopefully we can continue this discussion in other ways. Thank you so much. And that also concludes today's seminar. And I will now switch back to Swedish. Jag vill tacka så mycket för ni som var här idag, också ni som har följt det här online. Vi kommer se till att den här finns tillgänglig, både rapporten digitalt men också möjlighet att se det här i efterhand. Tyckte ni det var roligt, se till att dela det med andra och gör att vi fortsätter ha den här diskussionen, både om de lagförändringar som vi kan behöva för att tillåta en större mångfald av skolor med nya lösningar som faktiskt fungerar, men också andra frågor som vi kommer fortsätta lyfta inom ramen för Näringslivets skolforum. För det här är inte sista saken vi gör. Därför vill jag börja med att säga, har du idéer eller förslag på andra fördjupningar, saker vi bör studera, tveka inte att höra av dig. Håll också utkik på hemsidan, där kommer vi fortsätta presentera vad vi gör, men också finns en möjlighet att själv anmäla sig och få information direkt om vad vi gör. Vårt nästa event äger rum tisdagen den 3 oktober. Då ska vi fördjupa diskussionen som vi har inlett om hur vi stärker och breddar våra kunskaper i naturvetenskap och matematik. Med inriktning då på STEM-ämnena och att försöka få på plats en nationell STEM-strategi i Sverige. Senare i höst så kommer vi också återkomma med rapporter och seminarier kring läsning med fokus på tidiga skolor. Vi ska titta på matematik och kursplaner och vi kommer också diskutera olika delar av skolsystemets ramverk som inspektion, betyg och annat. Vi tänker hålla på med det här länge. Det är en oerhört viktig fråga och oerhört stora utmaningar vi står inför. Vi hoppas kunna vara en arena för detta. Vi vill att fler ska vara med. Hoppas att ni hittar hit igen. Tack för idag.